Wednesday Night Hump. Wednesday Night Hump is the live stream that we do every Wednesday night here on the Upstairs to the Right Music channel. And always good to be here, guys. So glad to be able to do this with you. I always start out by saying that I know that time is a valuable thing, and for you to spend a little bit of yours with me is always greatly appreciated. So I want to say thank you so much for signing in, for showing up, always supporting this channel. It is such a great feeling to have you guys. Such a great feeling. While I wait for more people to show up here in the chat, and let me make some adjustments as well here. Let me see. Yeah, actually, that's perfect. I like that one. That works for me. Mr. Watson's not going to be able to make it today, I see, but we are thinking about you, and thank you so much for at least chiming in, Michael. I appreciate it. Yeah, guys, it is interesting to me. I was, hey, Ben, how are you doing? Um, I was listening to my albums this week, and the deep end. I was, before I go to bed, I like to listen to things. Sometimes I listen to podcasts of different subjects. Sometimes I listen to music. And for some reason, I was in the mood to listen to some of my old records. And I've got myself a great set of wireless headphones, earpieces, and they are so nice and such great all around sound. You can really hear, the balance of your mix if you got it right or not with these. I really like them. And I was laying there listening to my album, The Deep End. Let's catch up here. Matty Two Hats, how you doing, sir? Welcome. Good to have you here. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Now, by the way, Scott left a message over on his channel that he's going to be out for a bit, taking care of some business. And so we wish him well. Hope he gets that wrapped up and gets back to us soon into his channel as well. So just that update on Scott. Good to see you guys. Um, and I was listening to the deep end. As a matter of fact, let me do that. I'll put it up here in the chat if you guys are interested in taking a look at that album. There's the link for it. And um, of all of my albums, the 7 albums I have out there, yes, 6 or 7. It gets a little foggy because there's the a couple of albums that I just completely forget about for some reason, but the deep end I can't forget about it because it is my favorite album. As a matter of fact, I think it's my best album, and so you can check it out there in the link in the chat if you're so interested in listening to it. Now at that stage of my life, this was my second album that I did in Japan. The first album that I did, The Sower, I actually did that in conjunction with some guys in my band, Keigo and Hideo and Ruta. And the four of us were the key group that played the instruments on that album. And sometimes on some of those tracks, I stepped out on my own, but for the most part, I counted on those guys. When I got to the deep end, I decided to record it myself, play all the instruments myself. And so it is a great album for, just getting a sense of my music style and the type of music that I do. A little bit eclectic all over the place, but the sound of that album, whereas as raw as it is, it's still a great album. But then I then listened to my later album, Asanoki, and I heard a progression there. I heard we're on. we're on because these are I can use these. I can't use the Sower album because it wasn't just me, but with these albums, I played all the instruments, and I could hear the progression of my back, how I got better. My production skills got better by the time I got to the Asanoki album, and that kind of brought a smile to my face because I thought about it. And Stony, hey, how are you doing? Yes, Stony, I am an artist. I just put a link there in the chat. You can listen to my album, The Deep End, my favorite of the 6 or 7 albums that I've done for myself. That one is my favorite. So you can check that out. But it put a smile on my face because, all this talk about AI music recently, and it is pretty dismal, if you kind of, war game it out to its conclusion. But one thing that AI can't do is it can learn patterns, but it doesn't grow the way that humans do. It doesn't struggle to get the perfect part. You know, I don't know that baseline is not working. Let me go redo it again. It doesn't improve. The production skills don't improve. It's basically just copying and mimicking. So there's no improvement there. Make mistakes. There are, like I said, with those headphones, I can hear mistakes in the albums. Glitches or little mistakes, but they add to the overall vibe and the human feel of the album. And um, it doesn't look back on itself years later, laying in their bed getting ready to go to sleep and say, "Hey, you know what? I got better." It's never going to do that. That's progression, and that's a journey. Everybody likes to use that word journey, but here's a good use for it. It actually fits in this context. It makes sense. It's only something that humans can do. So AI is never going to be able, you're never, you know, and one AI album from one year, again, like I said, it can learn patterns, but it's not going to ever be anything other than a copy. So that's actually a good thing. AI can't replicate the human experience. And catching lightning in a bottle, so to speak, because some of the greatest albums ever made were made in a very, very rushed way, in a very hectic way, but they had a vibe to them. Let me catch up here in the chat. It bullshits. Um, okay, I don't know what that means. Never heard of AI music making someone cry. Exactly. There's, I heard again the thing that just got me is on the gospel charts. Supposedly, this AI artist got to number one, and people couldn't figure out supposedly that it was supposed to be gospel music, but it's coming from a computer, and I don't know. I think people hear what I think people. They say that people see what they want to see. I think they hear what they want to hear too. So that's an interesting thing. Music Companion, how are you doing, sir? Welcome to the chat. I used the early AI music bots and tried to see if I could do music in the style of Megadeth and New York Dolls. It didn't even come close. It sounds like generic Iron Maiden or Effervescence. Yeah, again, it's only gonna learn from what it's the patterns and the data that it has to draw on, and it's never gonna really improve other than smoothing out its algorithm. It's not going to come up with anything emotional has been pointed out here, and it's also I don't think ever going to come up with anything like truly groundbreaking. And that kind of gets in line with what I want to talk about tonight. because one other thing that crossed my mind while I hold on here, let me find my notes. Um, did I even make notes for tonight? Oh, yeah, vaguely. I'll try to remember what I was thinking. Um, when I was listening to that album, uh, The Deep End, I was listening to the song. Which track was that? I want to get it right because I put it up there. Oh, I was listening to Ain't No Way. So track one on that. And, that track Ain't No Way is probably the funkiest thing that I've ever done. Seriously, honestly, there's just no way about it. Everything is just funky in that and very complex too, a lot of parts. Um, but the rhythm guitar part, I was trying to mimic um, that sound that Prince gets when he does just short little licks. I wish I was meant to have my guitar out here to give an example, but forgot to take it out of its bag. Those just staccato, rhythm licks. And where I can play in that style, I wasn't getting that sound of his. And um, I was listening to his Black album at that time, and it wasn't until now, well, not now, but within recent years that I realized that he was pitching a lot of that stuff up. The guitar that he was using and the guitar that I was using was completely wrong. He was using his Mad Cat or a Strat, and I was using a Telecaster. And and I never really achieved that sound. And it got me thinking about chasing sound. I kind of laughed about it. Even as I listen to Ain't No Way now, it's the sound that I got is funky, and it's something of its in of itself. But that wasn't the sound that I had in my mind when I was putting those rhythm guitar tracks down, and I was chasing a sound. And that's and I was like, well, this is about as close as I'm gonna get, but it ended up being something in itself. But I learned that trying to chase those sounds off those albums sometimes is a fool's foot race, and I'm going to talk about why that is tonight. Maddie says, I see AI lock a new plugin. It's really cool. And then I move on. I see it, like a new plugin. Yeah. Yeah, I got you. Music Companion says, I think Prince used double compression stages and EMGs, and whether high end studio stuff he had access. Yes, I'm going to, yes, yes. So that leads to the picture here that I have. I don't have my usual upstairs to the right studio logo photo. I have a photo of Uncle Jimmy, Mr. Jimmy Page, here in 1969, April of 1969, at Olympic Studios, tracking Led Zeppelin's second album, Led Zeppelin 2. And this is him with his acoustic guitar, and they've already tracked a whole lot of love, and he's moving on to doing some acoustic guitar overdubs. And here's the thing: if you want to get that whole lot of love sound, you know, this is kind of what you got to start. You got to be here. You got to be him, and you got to have that. You can't see it too well, but there's his number one Les Paul sitting there on top of a shelf. Anything other than that, submit to you tonight as a premise may be a full foot race. Now I know this, guys. I'm not just talking. I'm not just jive talking. Scott would appreciate that one. Um, I played in a cover band in Nagoya for a year, for a year, where we had to crank out, a lot of R&B and B and even some Marilyn Monroe and Elvis tunes. And I had to replicate keyboard sounds and guitar sounds when I played with the band. It was a live house band. And so I know what that's about. I know about listening to things and trying to get it. And brothers just sitting around like, well, I think he used this. Well, he used this, and that was that studio back then, and then, and I'm starting to realize that the guy who was like, well, that was that studio back then, was the correct one in the group. And this really is something, again, I can speak of from experience, from professional experience. But, you know, the myth of perfect tone, I think, is where this starts from. I think everybody, every musician, every producer, regardless of the genre, it can be rap or country or whatever, you're looking for the perfect tone, of course. And here's the truth: the perfect tone is mostly a myth. And this is because, especially if you are one of those folks who consider the perfect tone to have existed between 1965 and, oh, we'll be generous and say 1985. And you're listening to those old records, and like Van Halen 1, and you're like, well, how am I going to get that famous brown sound? Well, you got to use this power regulator on this amp and turn it down to half. And modelers, of course, have come along and made it way easier, so you get way closer, AI modelers. But even then, it's still going to be missing something in that element of the recording studios. You had multiple mics, EQ, compression, post production wizards. Um, you think it's the amp, like these amps over here. This is the bass amp set up over there. You think it's the amps? No, no, no. It's really the engineer. And then there's your playing. Dynamics, even the tiny little ones, pick attack, and room acoustics, all are part of the tone you're chasing. So unless you can get a modeler where they went to Olympic Studios and they set up these exact amps, and then they had Jimmy come in and play, and then they modeled the tone from that, then, including miking the room, then, it's just a fool's foot race, is my premise tonight. That's where I'm coming from. Man, Two Hat says some of those UA Oxbox tones are bang on, but then you're going to make it your own depending upon what you play. Exactly. See, well, I'll spoil the lead here. That's kind of where I'm going to. That's why I started with talking about I had a tone in my sound in my head, a Prince sound, but then that came out, and actually I was listening to it last night. I was like, that's pretty funky, that sounds pretty good. And you're going to make it even in your head. And when it translates to from your head to your fingers and your rig in your room or not, that's going to make the difference. And but I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. Um, it's not just you; it's the science of the room. You know, it's a little bit of a sadistic kind of magic, but it is the science of the room. On the Asanoki album, for example, if you listen to, let me see here. if you listen to a song like Beneath the Stones or Perfectly Lucky, all the rock songs, Monica Butterscotch, all of that stuff was recorded in a live room, mic'd up. You know, with the amps, my amp mic'd up. Sometimes I had my 1x12 and I had a 2x12, and I would mic those. And the acoustics of that room also plays a big part in the way this album sounds as well. Since I'm talking about that, it reminds for me to post that as well for those of you who are interested in listening to that. There it is. So the acoustics of the room made a difference. For example, again, the deep end was recorded in my attic studio in my house in Japan. Whereas that Asanoki album was recorded in my big studio room in my house in Singapore. And the acoustic, small, short, narrow ceilings, wood, all still wood in both cases. But then you had, if you guys go back and look at the videos from Singapore, you can see how big that room was. And those made a big difference in the sound between those two albums as well. I couldn't replicate either one of those albums unless I went back to those houses and those rooms in my house. Well, after I sold my house in Japan, they tore it down and remodeled it, so that's not going to happen again. But that's just something that I've observed over the years. Music Companion says, since the Guitar Studio Engineering YouTube, everyone hangs on the Shure 57, and that's fine. But I almost never see anyone praising the Royal 121. Well, th- that combination of the Royer 121 and the SM57, or what's the other one? It's like if you look at some of the recordings of Slash's solo albums when they go in the studios, most of the times they're using the Royer, a combination with other mics like the SM57, for example. But guys who know, if I could afford it, I would have loved to have one of those, or rented it, yeah, or something, But um, but yeah, they're pricey. Maybe because the Royer is 12 times the price. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Maddie. I understand that, but that's like singing the praises of Squire and snubbing a Les Paul standard. Yeah, if you go into the pro studios, you go into the big studios, they're using the 121. I can tell you, you again, you can go on YouTube and see it. Hell, that same video that showed that the guy showed had his compressor up, and I stole the compressor settings because they zoomed in and I froze it, took a picture of it, and I went in and on my plugin I copied the exact same compressor settings that he had set on his hardware version on my software version, and I labeled that plugin as Slash's comp, and boy, it worked great. It gave. But again, I digress a little bit. Um, but uh, they are using those for sure. But again, this gets into the room. You know, this is the type of room that makes albums that last through time. You know, now that's not taking anything away. I use them for an example, but I think it's somebody we can all kind of recognize. Like I'll go back to Prince and his basement studio in his house, in Minneapolis back in the early 80s. It was pretty basic. And yet that also, well, he finished the albums up at Sunset Sound. Uh, but still the genesis of those songs started there. So, it's and if you listen to the 1999 album, which was recorded there and then finished up at Sunset, and then listen to a later album like Diamonds and Pearls, for example, that was done when Paisley Park was finished. They don't sound the same. His sound, of course, he improved his playing play, but the overall sound of it. There's something about the rawness of those early Prince albums, and as he got older, they got more polished and they changed because he changed studios as well. They didn't sound the same. They didn't sound the same. And he himself, before he passed away, kind of admitted. He said, "Oh, I'm going to bring out my old Lynn drum machine," and he thought that's what it was that made the difference. But it was a little bit more than that, you know. You know. And yes, the cable brand matters too. you know, um, a lot of things in that chain that makes the sound. How much is that doggy in the window was also recorded on all analog in a big room too. Yeah, yeah, you know. And um, those songs uh, have again a lasting quality to them that rooms like this can achieve. I used the Prince as an example to give kind of an outlier, but this is the general rule. Rooms like Olympic Studios here. You know how many albums that we know of? The Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, The Who, Cream, Jimi Hendrix. I can go on about the people who recorded in this studio, and those albums have a certain sound to them. And it's a sound that is not just of course the bands have their sounds to them, but the overall sound of that album, of course, the board as well and the engineer, had a lot to do with it. But the sound of those rooms, that's why you always hear that, you know, that room has a good sound to it. So there's that. I hate to say, but as an example, imagine have the Beatles record with today's tech. Exactly. It would not sound the same. It would lose some of its character. Like Penny Lane. Imagine Penny Lane recorded, you know, on a laptop today in John's bedroom. Would you like a scone, mate? No, let's cut this vehicle and move on. it wouldn't sound the same. I'm acknowledging the fact that the albums that I recorded, they would not sound the same because if I recorded them in a different environment. With me it being this, I played everything, so I could just recreate what I played. It would sound different. I'm just saying there was a lot of throwaway music from that Erica house. Maddie, you always bring that up. My rebuttal to that, I've decided, is again, yeah, there was a lot of throwaway music, but it sounded great. It sounded good. And that's just the truth of it. Hi yourself, user YVAKB3II. Boy, that's a mouthful, 1T. Oh boy, that's funny. But you keep me on my toes on that boy. Don't stop saying it, Maddie, because again, that's a good point to bring up. Keep me on my toes. um, David Gilmour's "Comfortably Numb" I wrote down as an example. Stevie Ray Vaughan's "Clean to Overdrive" magic that he was able to do. Jimi Hendrix, you know, I don't even know what to call some of those tones he was getting out of that guitar, that Strat, were like Third Stone from the Sun. That song still trips me out when I listen to it. That song, Third Stone from the Sun, is what I consider to be the quintessential theme song for the Summer of Love of 1960. If you want to sum up, the year that I was born, that song sums it up. But that sound of that, I still to this day, again, I've heard people play that, but I've never heard it sound like that. And you're not going to hear it sound like that because it was recorded again. I believe that was cut here at Olympic. You know, everybody thinks that some pedal plus some amp is going to equal the same tone, even if it's the exact same guitar or amp, type of guitar or type of amp. Johann Segborn's channel, he's famous for that. He says you're going to recreate because he is in love with Kiss's 75 live album tone. That's the one that he's been chasing more or less for about 10 years now on YouTube. And there you can see examples of where he's playing it and it gets close, but it's still missing the fact that it's not recorded, at, Electric Ladyland. It's missing that element as well. And the board that it was recorded through. Hell, you use him. I think sometimes he even uses the actual mics, but still, you everybody thinks that some pedal plus some amp is going to equal the same tone that they hear off an album, but reality, not even close. Multiple takes. I can tell you, EQ, layering, and sometimes, honestly, just a bit of luck. Again, catching that lightning in a bottle. Like, wow, man, what was that guy? That one, there was some song, some group called Butterfly, something or another, and they recorded it in the studio, and the guitar player was like gone or something on acid, and he recorded it, and then later on when they had to replay it live, he couldn't do it, and that was the end of that band because he couldn't, they literally caught lightning in the bottle because afterwards the guitar player could not remember how to play that. Does anybody out there remember what I'm talking about? I just, I'm sure somebody's got to remember that story. But that's a good example of catching lightning in a bottle. Happened once. It just happened to be there. They caught that guy at the right peak of his high, and they happen to have the mics and the tape rolling. So there is that. So that pedal you buy thinking it'll make you sound like Gilmore in the studio, well, odds are you'll sound more like barely awake in the basement. Let me check the live stream here. Have you heard Gary Clark Jr.'s version? It's pretty great. Oh, I'm sure it is. Again, like I said, I've heard great versions of that. My point is that if you those that vibe, I'm talking about that. This is we're getting into the things that aren't, they're intangibles. We're talking about the vibe or the the moment that gets captured on tape. And sound wise, Gary Clark Jr. I'll take a listen to it, um, but there's a haunting ghostliness to Hendrix playing, especially on Third Stone from the Sun, that I haven't heard anybody recreate. It's haunting, actually. Everybody can they play it pretty, but they miss that haunting element. That it's almost like a foreboding kind of a thing, actually. So there's that. Now we keep chasing legendary tones for some of the reasons that I said before, and I've talked about in past live streams: nostalgia, the psychology, hero worship, and just pure fear of missing out. It's generally that about covers all the bases. I think our brains love stories. The more legendary the tale, the more we can justify the purchase of a pedal. And again, the dopamine effect. I keep bringing that up, but dopamine, is a pretty strong thing. And that dopamine, that effect that we get, like I was saying in the last live stream, that every time we make that purchase, that dopamine, oh, this is the one, this is going to be it, and we just kind of feed that. And we don't get any real satisfaction until we start recognizing that maybe what we're playing ain't that bad. You can use a tone or chase a tone as an idea that eventually what goes down to tape is going to sound like you where you're recording it at. And even years later, if you take you and you put that yourself in a different environment, and later you're mature, you're gonna play, you're gonna be a better player, so you're gonna play it just that much better, a little slicker, you know, and it's not going to sound the same as the first recording because that's a different environment and your vibe is different. The vibe of that day is different. But our brains love those stories. So what's the lesson here? The, you know, really, instead of chasing impossible tones, what I like to do, or I like to do, what I was doing is using a tone as a reference. Let me try to get as close to that Prince, Lady Cab Driver sound. You guys know what I'm talking about? Listen to Prince's Lady Cab Driver and listen to those guitar licks. That crispiness of it. That crispiness of that tone was brought about because the Mad Cat's pickup is not in the same pickup position as a Strat. It's kind of rides between a Tele and a Strat, and therefore it's got a tone all of itself. The minute that I got that Mad Cat and I bought it and I started when I put it through my rig and I played those licks, that was pretty close. Again, not his basement, but that was the tone, and I realized that crispiness. It's a Mad Cat is a great guitar for funk licks. It's just that guy's. I think he knew that. um, so focus on your tone. You can use legendary tones, whatever, as your inspiration. But then after you record it, listen to what you've done and say to yourself, "Well, it may not. It may sound close, or that's it, or close enough." But sometimes, the best things is when it sounds like you and you're like, hey, you know what? That doesn't sound bad. I think I'm going to go with that instead. You know, small deviations make it your sound and they make it unique. And don't fear them. The reason that enjoyed, and one of the reason number 363 why I don't want to really get into recording anymore is the truth is I like recording mic in a room with amps and live drums and stuff like that because I like okay, we're going to do a digital, fine, but I still want to put an element of chaos in there somewhere where there's a reflection in the room. There's something, a lot of people go and clean those things up, but you know what? Some of that stuff actually can make some interesting noise on your record, just pure luck. And you want to have the kind of setup to do that. You're not going to do that when you're completely in the box because there's no chaos in that. So it's okay if your comfortably numb attempt ends up sounding like barely awake. That's okay. Just own it. Own it. Your tone is part of your identity as a player. And your idea of being you, you're not going to be a rock star, even in your own head or in real life, if you know you're not owning up to what it is that you output, and you're not going to be a carbon copy of somebody else's studio magic. You're going to have to make your own, and that's just the truth of it. uh, I have been a big proponent of that live room. When you can get into a place like this, it's pure magic. And we were talking about expensive microphones and not expensive microphones. Um, you want to use the best microphone you can. So, but that comes down to what you can afford as well, as was pointed out there. But it's that's just one part of it. It's the amp, like I said, even the cables, the length of the cables, the board. Was the board, the power that was running through that board that day? Because they got to keep that regulated. You don't want spikes, things like that, guys. You got to really kind of think that through. There's a lot of things that went into getting that song on that album. Some of that Hendrix stuff, especially live off the desk, is pretty crazy good. Takes you on a journey. Yeah, man, he really does. Like I said, guys, just one of these days, if you're on a holiday on a beach, or you're somewhere in a cabin in the woods or whatever, just put on a pair of headphones, take a shot of whiskey or a Smokey or J, or some hot cocoa, whatever your thing is, and put on Third Stone to the Sun and just listen to that, man. That song just takes you places. It is one of the strongest compositions out there in that regard, I think, from that period of time. Really, it really is. It's something like that. I would say Dear Prudence also has that kind of vibe to it as well. Back to the mic chat. No matter what mic I use, I always sound like me in the mic. Really doesn't matter. Yeah, again, you want to use the best mic that you can get. But if the studio has it, then then use theirs. But um, there's so many other things in that chain that's just part of it. So I can't argue that myself. For instance, I love light slapback echo reverb, but I try not to sound like the Edge. I got you. Once my daughter said, "Dad, that sounds like you too," I crank up the distortion. Yeah, I would find out where the edge was coming from, because that's not an original idea off the top of his head. I'm sure of that. So I would just say, okay, where what is his guitar heroes, and where is that sound coming from? And it's just like with all of these drummers, uh, like Karen Carpenter and John Bonham. And I know that sounds weird, but again, I remind you, Karen Carpenter was a hell of a drummer. John Bonham, cats like that, they had jazz drummers that were their inspiration. That's kind of where their sound came derived from there. Anthony, better late than never, man. It is good to have you here, sir. How are you? Is Scott on strike? No. Scott left a message on his channel, a very interesting one. He said, and I quote, Santa's got to deal with some people who are on his naughty list. Take that for whatever. But I hope that he's taken care of and he gets back with us soon. But he'll be back. He'll be back. He's just been handling some business, some Santa business. um, Guys, go over to Joy Fry Rocks channel. She's got a channel, Joy Fry Rocks. Go over and check her out. I got a feeling I want to reach out to her. Um, she's somebody that I would like to do a live stream with. Let me make sure I got this. Did I get that right? Why is that not coming up? That's interesting. If anybody can find that, no, I'll find it because I'm the one that's talking about it. Sorry, guys. I'm looking for it. I'm looking for her. For some reason, her channel's not coming up now. Why? That's super weird. Well, anyway, I'll find it and I'll post it down in the comment section of this video. She's somebody I think that I want to do a joint live stream with. I like her live streams. I like her take on a lot of things. So head over to her channel. I'll put the link when I find it. I should have done this beforehand. Down in the comment section of this, go over to her channel and give her a shout out. Um, what else am I missing here? All right, back to the chat here. All right, so yeah, we're all caught up here. Yeah, I think, guys, that in conclusion, there are legendary tones that can inspire and take you on a journey. But don't let that tone chase enslave the you, because as much as, let's say, what can I use? Like Brian Seltzer loves Eddie Cochran, and you can hear it in his playing. He didn't let Eddie Cochran define him. He didn't let it enslave the person that he became, the guitar player that he became. It was part of his vocabulary. It was a sound that he had in his head, but eventually he came out sounding like Brian Seltzer. Keep in mind that he did this in a studio using studio magic, layering, EQ, and just a sprinkle of myth to make those sounds iconic. Your tone is yours, um, totally unique to you. And that's the thing as a true musician that you should always be seeking. Music Companion says, David Kratzheld. I'm sorry, did I pronounce that correctly? Welcome to you too. Hello to you. Music Companion says, do you think legendary tones sometimes come from producers like Mike Klink, who produced Megadeth, Guns N' Roses? Oh, yeah. It's because again, look at it was what's his name back there in the 60s that was producing a lot of those albums. Oh god, my mind is gone. I can see his face and think of him now, but uh, the Eagles hated him because they hated his sound, and that's why they went off and did their own thing for their second album. Oh, anyway, doesn't matter. Yeah, the producer has a lot to do with that as well. Not Phil Spector. No, we're talking about over in the UK, and this guy did everybody's album, a lot of people's album. I can't think of him right now. But in any case, yes, the producer has a lot to do. But those producers worked in certain studios on certain boards. Reason I'm thinking about this guy is because this was his domain. This was the studio that he worked in. I cannot think of his name now. But Phil Spector would be a good example of that as well. Phil Spector liked a certain studio. What was that studio that he worked in? Oh, gosh. In any case, he loved that LA studio. That's where he got his sound. Um, so the studio was an extension of the producer in that case. I've subbed. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Join the community here, David, and feel free to always chime in. We've got a great community here full of great guys. We just So, sometimes there's a few of us, sometimes there's a lot of us. Doesn't matter. We come here twice a week on Wednesday nights, 11 p.m. Central European time. I'm based here in Amsterdam. And also on Sunday nights, same time. And we just shoot the breeze about certain topics. Try to keep it interesting. I don't want to be boring. I do want to, touch on everything that the music industry is involved in. And my gosh, it has tentacles in everything. You'd be shocked. But welcome to the group here. Um, I'm German, actually. Oh, well, then it's not late for you. we're 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 not talking drastically different time zones here. If you're in Germany, if you're typing from Germany. Um, the studio was an extension of the artist, and of course, even more so of the producer. And again, I tell the story of Tupac going in the studio and chastising uh, the producers for that session that day because they were dicking around on the drum machines. He said, "You, what are you doing? We need to have music playing all the time. We need to be riffing off of this, vibing off of this. We need to be coming up with ideas. We need to be recording. We need to just going all the time." And this is very true for that particular genre of music, and to achieve that lightning in the bottle, that moment, catching that moment. He knew that that was a very important production technique. And so, honestly speaking, um, again, the room, the vibe, all those things are part of, how drunk was Eddie Van Halen when he played Eruption, when he was recording it. Was he bone sober? I doubt it. Was it, mildly stoned? All these things, man, really play into it. So use them as an inspiration, but don't use them as a defining thing. Like, well, I'm no good unless I can sound like that. Nah. I'm German, actually. Guten Tag. Evening, my brother. It's near midnight here. Yeah, it's near midnight here. It's right here in sunny Amsterdam. It's 11:52. So we're in the same time zone. But those are my thoughts today, guys. The studio tone myth. Because again, go back here in the chat and hit those links up for those albums that I was of my own that I was talking about, and listen to those. And again, you can hear those differences. Um, and it wasn't just me maturing as a artist. It was the rooms that I recorded them as well. Yeah. I recorded 3 albums. Well, but the Asanoki album, half of that was recorded in Singapore, the other half was recorded here, and I can hear the difference in those tracks. Just to kind of back that up. Mike, have you seen the Tupac screen test before he got cast in Boys in the Hood and his real personality? It's great. Yeah, again, how can I put this? It doesn't detract anything away from their talent, whether they actually had that talent or if it was MK Ultra into them. However, these are all people playing roles and they're all actors. And and the way they are off screen and on screen, truly sometimes can be mind boggling, to say the least. So that I haven't seen it, but that really wouldn't surprise me at all, knowing that. So there is that, guys. Just a thought. You know, please go back up there and listen to that album, The Deep End. And I'd like to hear your thoughts down in the comment section of that link for that album. And Tell me what you think about that. That's of all the albums that I've done of myself, self-produced albums. That's my favorite one. And even though technically, my playing isn't as strong as it got later, production, I still like that one because the tone. I recorded that in that little itty bitty attic, the original upstairs to the right too, because it was up the steps and to the right. Went up the steps in my house to the right and up into the attic, and that's where I was set up. And I recorded that album there, and I don't know, it just has a sound to it. It has a tone to it, and it's something. It's something. All right, guys. I think we have hit upon that subject enough. Um, I really think that you should always be chasing your own sound, your own tone. And that comes across, of course, in your character as well. When you're out there amongst the public, you know, your tone, the way you present yourself, is something that you work on as well. So there's that. Let me catch up here in the chat before we go out. Thank you, Ben. N- Naka Cullen. Hey, how you doing? Welcome, welcome. Greetings to you. We're about to sign off here. But better late than never. I'm glad you stopped in here to say hello to us. Really good to have you. Yeah, guys, just a thought. Um, I've been tired these days. I have to retool again when my business to meet with the environment today. And that's a lot of work. And it's a lot of thinking. And it's not just in one language, it's in Japanese as well, English and Japanese. And my brain is, it's fried. It's Wednesday and I'm already fried. And that's not good. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to put on my nice set of earphones and maybe listen to Third Stone from the Sun before I go to bed. Listen to that again. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for spending your time coming here and sharing your thoughts with me. I really greatly appreciate it so much. Thank you for subbing to the channel as well. That means a lot to me, man. And I'm glad to have you join the community here. And we will do this again coming up here on Sunday at Mike's. Same time, same bat channel. You guys take care. Until then, be good. Bye.